What's happening, guys? Welcome to the next part in the installment on Python for data science. I'm so glad you can all be here. So my name is Nicholas Renaud, and in this live stream, we are going to be going through a couple of key things, but we're going to be building up from what we've gone and done previously. So let's actually go and take a look as to what we're going to be going through in this particular stream. So namely, we're going to be covering two key things, but we're going to be building up from all the variables, data types, and different components that we've already built on already. So specifically, we're going to be taking a look at conditions and loops in this video. So without blabbing on and going through too many slides, let's get straight to it and let's get to coding. So let's do this. Okay. So what we're going to go on ahead and do is create or open up our existing Jupyter notebook. So remember, we had our previous Jupyter notebook that we set up in the previous video where we went through all of our data types and variables. So what we're going to do is start up a new Jupyter notebook and we're going to go on ahead and add on to that. So I'm going to go to our command prompt. And as per usual, we're going to navigate into the same place where our Jupyter notebook currently is. So in this particular case, the Jupyter notebook that we've been working with so far is inside of a folder. Let me just bring this over to this side. Is inside of a folder, and this is just where I've got it. You could have it in other places if you wanted to. Perfectly fine to do that. So it's inside of a folder called Python Basics, and you can see I've got a Jupyter notebook there called pythonbasics.ipynb. So that is going to be the main Jupyter notebook that we're going to be working through, at least for the basics segment of this series. So what we need to do is navigate into that folder, so we can do that. So I'm just going to go CD into, actually we need to go into our D drive. And then we are going to go into the YouTube folder and then Python Basics. So CD YouTube, CD Python Basics. Now I'm going into this folder, but again, you could have your Jupyter notebook stored wherever you like, and it's perfectly fine to open it up from there. This is just because I've got it stored inside of this drive, inside of this folder, inside of this folder. This is the reason why I need to navigate to here. So what we're going to then do is start up Jupyter Notebook. And how do we do that? We type in Jupyter Notebook. And that is going to open up our Jupyter Notebook. It's just opened up on my other screen. And you can see I've got my Python Basics file there. So this is pythonbasics.ipynb. So we're going to open it up. And this is all the stuff that we did in the previous part of the data science series. So we've gone through variables, we've gone through data types, and we have also gone through lists as well. And I believe we've gone through dictionaries. So we've gone through 4 sections so far. So all of this good stuff. Now, again, we're going to be building up on top of this. So I'm going to create a new cell. And how do we create a new cell again? We just type in particularly a new cell below our current cell. We just hit B, and that's going to give us some new cells. Now, if we want to smash through and create a bunch of new cells, we just hit B, B, B a bunch of times. And then in order to get started for this particular part of the tutorial, what we're going to do is we're going to, again, keep our structure because we want to have structure in our code. So remember, in order to create what we're going to do is we're going to create a markdown cell. And to create a markdown cell, remember we hit escape on our keyboard to convert it from green to blue. So this means that we are not currently active in that cell. And then to convert it from a markdown cell or from a code cell to a markdown cell, we just hit M on our keyboard. So you can see it's gone to markdown over there rather than being code. If we want to convert it back to code, we just hit Y and that's code. Markdown code, markdown code, markdown code. All right, cool. We want it to be markdown. So the next part that we are going to go through is conditions and logic. So this is really, really important. So we are going to call it, and remember to actually add a heading, we're going to add in a pound sign, and then I'm going to name it. What are we up to here? So dictionaries was part 3, so this is going to be part 4. We're going to call it conditions and logic. Alrighty. Now, let me give you a little bit of background as to where you're going to use this. So when you go through a large amount of pre-processing, or when you go through pretty much the majority of data science processes, you're going to want to perform checks. So say, for example, I'm going and building up a object detector, right? And I'm going to build an object detector to detect my face. Say, for example, I detect that I've got a face in my frame using my camera. I might want to do something with that video. So how do we actually go about doing that? Well, what we'd actually do is we'd use some conditions and logic to be able to detect that. So what we're basically going to say is, if we have a face within our frame, then we go and do something. This is exactly how we go and apply conditions and logic inside of Python. Now, I've sort of given it away a little bit in that the if statement is probably one of the most important statements when it comes to conditions. So let's actually add in a comment. So we are going to use the if statement. So remember to apply a comment, we have to be inside of a code cell, and we add in a pound symbol again, and then we can type whatever we want. So we are going to say applying logic using the if statement. Cool. So what we're going to do is we're going to apply a little bit of, let's actually do a test. So remember, we're going through our space theme. So we are going to check whether a user's name is a particular thing. And if it is a particular thing, then we're going to print it out. So specifically, we are going to set up a statement. Let's say Neil Armstrong walks in the room, right? So, and we've passed through a variable called name. And in this particular case, we're going to set name equal to Neil Armstrong. And if it's equal to Neil Armstrong, we're going to print something out. We might say, hey, what's up, Neil? So first up, what we need to do is create a variable. So we're going to say name, and this is going to be a placeholder to hold our data type, which in this case is going to be a string. So we are going to assign it a value. So I'm going to say equals. And then in order to create a string, remember the defining characteristic for a string is that it is inside of quotes. And we're going to set our name to Neil Armstrong. Right? And then remember, we need to do this check. How are we going to do this check, right? So we want to apply some logic and go, hey, if the name or if the person walking into the room is Neil, then we want to go and do something, right? We want to print out his name and say, what's up, Neil? So we're going to say if, and this is where the if statement comes in. So we're going to use our variable. So if name equals Neil Armstrong, and then colon, and then do something. All right, before we go on ahead, let's actually take a look at what we wrote there. So what we've gone and done, let me zoom in on this, is we've gone and created a if statement. So this over here is a reserved word, so you can see it's in green. So this if statement is a core component of applying logic. Now, if we wanted to go and take a look at what the if statement does, we can type in if, question mark, question mark. It doesn't look like it works for the if statement. Let's actually type it in. So if statement, Python. So you can see this is, what is it, W3 school. So again, so this is a Python condition. So Python, if, else, we're going to get to else in a second. But if is our main condition, right? So what we've done is we've written if name equals Neil Armstrong. And again, this is a string, and then colon. So this colon is really, really important in Python. If I don't have a colon, it's going to throw an error. Now, you're probably thinking, hey, Nick, a single equals doesn't do a check, but a double equals does. So this is a key thing. If we use one equal sign, this is assigning a value to a variable. If we do double equals, this is actually a logical check. So this is also referred to as a logical operator. So if you type in Python logical operators, you can see that there are a whole bunch over here. So we can see that plus equals, equals, whole bunch of different checks. So this is referred to as a logical operator. But just think about it as saying, hey, if name equals Neil Armstrong, then we're going to do something, right? So there's a whole bunch of different logical operators as well. So I believe if we want to check whether or not it's not equal, where is the not version? Not is exclamation mark equals. So we'll take a look at that as well. All right, so if name equals Neil Armstrong, then we want to do something. So we're going to print, what's up, Neil? So if we go and run this now, ideally what we should see is that, am I spelling Neil right? Yeah, I am. If we go and print this out, we should see that it goes and prints out sup Neil. So if we run it, and remember to run a cell inside of a Jupyter notebook, we hit Shift Enter, and you can see it's gone and printed out sup Neil. Now, what would happen if we went and assigned that name something different, right? So let's say we assigned it Nick, right? So my name. Now, what would you expect to happen right here? So it wouldn't actually print out sup Neil because our name does not equal Neil Armstrong. So if I go and run this, nothing happens. And this is where a logical operator or a condition really starts to come into comes in handy. So we are able to perform a number of checks. Now, in this case, we're doing a string check, but we could take a look at different numbers. So if this particular value is greater than a value, then we can do that. If it doesn't equal a particular value, then do that. So let's say, how would we make this print out sup Neil at the moment? What we could do is we could actually go and change our variable to be Neil Armstrong again, but we could also do one other thing. So rather than checking whether or not our name is Neil Armstrong, we could say what happens if our name isn't Neil Armstrong, then we're going to print out sup not Neil. And you can see that we've gone and done this. So again, by changing our logical operator, or in this case, our logical operator, we're able to change how we go and apply our logic and specifically our condition. But now we're going to leave it as equals equals. So you're going to use this a ton when it comes to working inside of data science, because often you're going to need to check whether or not a particular value equals something, whether or not a particular value is greater than a particular value. So let's actually do one with a number, right? So we're going to say create a new variable. So test number equals 10. And we're going to use the if statement again. So if test underscore number is greater than, let's say 5. And so again, this is another example of a logical operator. So this is greater than, this is less than. We can also say greater than equals to. And I'll include a list of logical operators in the description below so you can see those as well. But basically, you've got the ability to perform a whole bunch of checks using the if statement, also known as a Python condition. So we're going to add in our colon again, and we are going to print out number. Actually, we'll use a string. Number is greater than 5. Greater than equal to. Because remember, we've added this equals as well. So if we go and run this now, you can see that we're now performing a check on a number. Now, we could also, what would happen if we dropped our number to below 5? So if I make it 4, you can see that it's not printing anything out. So in this particular case, we've gone and applied a logical operator inside of a Python condition using numbers rather than a string. So this is an example for a string. This is an example for a number. Now, once we get to the pandas section of this course, what you'll notice is that you use this a ton. So you'll actually check whether or not a particular value is greater than a particular value, and based on that, you won't just be printing out a value in this case. So I guess I'm trying to give you a little bit of context. You won't just be printing out a value. More often than not, you'll go and apply a specific transformation. So say, for example, a really good example is probabilities. So when you use certain machine learning models, what you'll actually get back is a probability. And that probability is going to be between the values 0 and 1. More often than not, what you're going to do is apply a bit of a logic gate. So you're going to say, if that probability is greater than 5, then the probability, or the thing that's actually being predicted is true. If it's below 5, then the thing that's actually being predicted is false. So how might we do that, right? Let's actually take a look at this. So rather than leaving it as test number, so let's call it probability. And we're going to set it to 0.73. And remember, what type of data type is this? This is a float. So what we're going to then do is type in if probability is greater than 0.05 or 0.5, then we are going to print true. And then we should have the other side of this as well, but we're going to get to that in a second. So if we print true, that is printed out true. Now you're probably thinking, well, how do I print out false or return false if it's not greater than 0.5? This is the next step in our set of conditions. So what we can do is we can apply the next level of conditions. We can type in elif, and we can also apply else. Let's actually apply else in this case. So we are going to say else, and you can see there that else is in green as well. That's a conditional operator, right? You can see that. So what we're going to say, actually, let's leave it as else. So if it's not greater than 0.5, then what we are going to do is print false. Right, so right now it's still returning true because we haven't changed our probability. We change our probability to 0.04, for example, you can see it's now printing out false, right? So that looks all good. But what would happen if our probability was a negative value, right? In that particular case, we probably got an issue with our probabilities. So let's actually do this. So we wouldn't actually want to print out false. We actually would want to print out, hey, double check your probabilities. There's something weird here. So what we can do is let's change this probability to a negative number. So let's say -7, right? And right now, all it's doing is printing out false. So let's actually recap on what we've done so far. So we've written probability equals -7, and then we've got our first condition, which is if probability is greater than equal to 0.5, colon, then we're going to print out true. And remember, true is a Boolean value, so true or false are the Boolean values. And then what we've also got is another condition, in this case, else. So read else, let's actually add some commentary as anything else. Oh, and I've also missed out on a key thing. When you're using if statements, it is white space sensitive. So you can see there, I've actually gone and tabbed this in. If I remove these tabs, it's going to throw an error. So you can see that. So when you're coding up conditions in Python, you need to indent them like so. So I'm just going to hit tab, and that's going to work again. So a key thing to point out as well there. So we are going to, let's actually write some commentary for our condition. So our first condition is whether or not our probability is greater than 0.5, sorry. And then our next condition is anything else. So basically, this is actually checking whether or not we're greater than 0.05. This is just checking whether or not we've got a different value, right? So not 0 or less than equal to 0.05 or 0.5. So you can see that that's all working there, right? But as of right now, this doesn't really meet our conditions at the moment. So what we need to do is we need to apply another condition to check whether or not we've got screwy probabilities. So let's actually do another check. So what we're going to say is return or print out error or statement if probability is below 0. And what I'm going to do is introduce you to the next part of a Python condition. And this is how we go and apply a secondary check. So what we can do is type in Elif. And the way I always remember this is I keep thinking of an elf. I don't know why, but that's sort of what reminds me of this particular statement. So Elif, and then we can apply another condition. So we're going to say if probability is less than, let's say less than 0, then what we're going to do is print check your probabilities. And if we go and run this now, you can see that because our probability is -7, we are stopping at this condition, right? Now, if we made our probability somewhere between 0 and 0.5, what we should print out is false now. So again, that's working correctly. So if we go and print out, let's set it to 0.04. Let's do, 0.1. You can see that it's now getting stopped by this condition down here. So it's falling into the anything else bracket. Cool. So that is conditions in a bit of a nutshell. So what have we got? All right. So that's looking all good. So we've gone through, let's do a quick recap. So we can create a condition using the if statement. We can create a secondary condition using the elif statement. And again, a core thing whenever you're writing up these conditions is that you started off by writing if, and then you pass through your statement or whatever you want your operator to be. So in this case, if probability is greater than equal, and greater than equal is an example of a logical operator. So there's a ton of different logical operators. So you can use equals equals, you can use greater than equals, less than, that you can say not. And remember, not is with the exclamation mark and then equal sign. So you can see that there. And then in order to finish off your if statement, you need to end it with a colon. And then when you want to actually do something as a result of that if statement being met as true, what you need to do is tab in whatever you want to do after that. So in this case, we're just printing stuff. So we need to tab in a print. If we want to apply a secondary conditional statement or another set of checks, we can go and use the elif statement. So you can see that that is shown there. And in this case, we're checking whether or not our probability is less than 0. And remember, it's sort of the same, right? So you use the statement, so elif, pass through your statement and use your logical operator, and then you close it using a colon. then if we want to actually go and do something, remember we need to tab it in. Now, we can end our condition using the else statement. So basically, this is sort of like the catch-all bucket, right? So in this particular case, we've just written else and then colon. So you don't need to pass through a statement, or you're not meant to pass through a statement when you're using the else component. So that is conditions in a nutshell. Now, the other one that I want to sort of show you, which is one that I use quite a fair bit, is whether to check whether or not something is in a particular list. So let's actually create a list. And remember, we can create a list of, we name a variable. So in this case, it's going to be a list of names. So I'm going to type in names. And let's actually just copy, let's write it out. And so remember, the defining characteristic of creating a list is square brackets. So we're going to create square brackets and then pass through some names. So we're going to do Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, Sally Ride, who else? Yuri Gagarin. And the last one, we're going to say Elon again, Elon Musk. Right, so that is our list now set up. So in order to run that, we can just hit Shift Enter on our keyboard. Let's add some commentary, good practice. So create a list of names. And then say, for example, we wanted to do a logical check to see whether or not a particular value is within this array or within this list. Now, rather than actually going and looping through, which we'll do in a sec, rather than looping through each one of these values, we can actually use the in statement from Python. So say, for example, I wanted to check whether or not the name Elon Musk is inside of that list. What I can do is say if, actually, we can just do Elon Musk in names. We should actually get rid of that. You can see it's printed out true. So the cool thing about this is that this in statement basically allows us to perform a check over our entire list. So what I've written there is, again, I've created a string. So in this particular case, I've started it off with quotes, and then I've written Elon Musk in name. So this is almost like looping through each one of our values, or it's actually going through all of our values really quickly and doing that check. Now we can have our if statement. So if Elon Musk in names, then what we can do is print Elon's here. Cool. So that sort of shows you how, and again, I use that quite a fair bit inside of a lot of data science work, and you probably will as well, because you want to check whether or not a particular value is inside of a series or inside of a list. So again, we'll go through this in a bit of detail when we look at pandas as well. Now, what you would have seen there is that there was a little bit of an error where I tweaked this print. So say, for example, I did this, right? So I wanted to have an apostrophe after Elon's, right? If I go and run this now, it's going to throw an error. And this is because Python is reading this as though I'm closing off my string here with an apostrophe. What we need to do is do this thing called an escape to get past this. And to escape out of this, we can just pass through a backslash. So this sort of tells Python, hey, skip that quote, don't treat it as closing off our string. So if ever you get an error that's sort of like this, or you want to print apostrophes inside of your strings, you can go and escape it, and you can see that now we're printing out Elon's here. So this is an example of an escape using Python escapes. And that's particularly useful whenever you're working with strings or string formatting. Having that backward slash allows you to escape characters when you want to pass through, what would that be? Grammatical components. Okay, so let's do a recap. So we have gone through conditions, and we've taken a look at how we can use the if statement, and we've also taken a look at a few different logical operators. So we've taken a look at equals equals, we've taken a look at exclamation mark equals, so this is not, this is equals. We've taken a look at how we can use greater than, how we can use less than, and we've also taken a look at the different components when actually going on and applying conditions. So we've taken a look at the if statement, and remember, core thing when you're creating your if statement, pass through your actual statement or whatever you want your condition to be, then close it off with a colon. Really important that you close it off with a colon. And then in order to actually do something, or when that if statement is triggered, you need to tab in order for that to be valid. Otherwise, you're going to get an error and you're going to have a bad time. Then in order to have a secondary elif statement or do another elif statement as part of that if statement block, we can use the elif statement, which in this case, remember elves, that's an easy way to remember. It's a ELIF, that's elif, or also known as else if, that's sort of where it comes from. And again, remember the way to define it is again, very similar to how we define our if statement up here, except you're just using the elif statement. And then in order to have a catch-all, we can use the else statement down there. And then what else have we done? We've also gone and used the in statement to be able to go and check whether or not a particular value is in a list. And again, you'll use this a lot when it comes to working inside of data science. On that note, that is our conditions and logic now done. Now we're up to our loops. So again, we're going to create let's actually take a little break, see if we got any questions. Love the background image, awesome. Can I teach you ROS? Yes, I don't know. We'll get to it eventually. I haven't done too much with it, but I'll definitely take a look at something in that. Ashley, what's happening? Leisha Jane, glad you're watching while you work. Yeah, the indentation can be a little bit tricky, but if you just remember that you need to tab in whenever you've got a condition, it's just going to make your life a whole lot easier. You can use double quotation marks. So this is a great question. So can we use double quotation marks when we're going and printing stuff out? So if I use double quotations, I can do that as well. All right, not going to throw an error. Cool. All right, so any additional questions? What else do we have? Was this, I think this was your question. So can we get rid of the escape if we actually use double quotations? So yeah, so again, it's not going to pick it up there. It's more if you're using the same type. So if I use double apostrophes there, I'd need to escape out of it. So good question there. So if we use a different type of quote, so we can actually use single quotes or double quotes inside of Python. If I use double quotes, I don't need to escape the single quote. But if I use, say for example, a single quote here, I can put a double quote here without an issue. So that's another way to get around actually having to use the escape. But it's really, really important to understand Python escapes because they're going to make your life a ton easier when you get stuck with something like that, right? Okay, so that is, and let's save this. So we're pretty good now. So that is conditions and logic now wrapped up. Now, the next thing that we're going to go on ahead and do is loops. So I love loops. Loops are really, really important because they allow you to do something multiple times. So this is the power of Python programming and programming in general. You want to be able to repeat and automate stuff using a loop. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new section now, and we are going to convert this into Markdown. How do we convert a cell into Markdown? We hit escape on our keyboard, and you can see it's now gone blue. Then we hit M on our keyboard to convert it into a Markdown cell, which you can see up there. And then we're going to create a new section. And this last section was 4. Let's just make sure. All right. So this section is going to be section 5. And we're going to call it loops. All right. So we have a bunch of loops that we're going to be getting through. So let's actually do this. So the first loop that we're going to go through is the for loop. So the way to use this, so let's actually add a comment. So for loop. So the way to use this is to type in for, which you can see down there. So let's add in a couple of extra cells. How do we do that? Hit B, and this is going to add more cells below. So the for loop is going to allow us to continue doing something and basically loop through a set of values. That's probably a terrible explanation, but let's actually take a look at how it's used. So in order to do it, we write for, and then we need to loop through something. So say we wanted to loop through all of these different names here. And remember, we went through and applied or checked whether or not Elon was in that list of names. But what happens if we want to apply different components or different Python conditions to that set of names? We'd actually want to loop through and apply some conditions. So what we're going to do is let's define this. So for name in names, then we can go and do something. So before I actually go and write out the loop, let's actually take a look at what we've written there. So we've added it in comment and we've written for loop. This is an example of a for loop. Let's actually write proper commentary. And then we've written for name in names. Now, let me explain what this is doing. So basically what we're doing is we're looping through our names list, which we had up here. And we are going to be able to interact with each value in that list at a point in time. So you can see here that we've got name. So name is going to be the single value that we're looping through at that point in time. Now let's actually do something. So remember, this is similar to a if statement in that in order to do something in our for loop, we need to tab in, right? Cool. So let's say, for example, we just wanted to print out every name. I can type in print and then name. And you can see that is looping through each and every name that I've got inside of my list. So what we've written is for name in names, print, and then we're actually printing out the current name. So this name value is actually the value that we're actually looping through at a point in time. So we're basically going through and actually going, all right, print out Neil, print Neil, print Buzz, print Sally, print Sally. So we're basically going, this is the first name, so we're going to print out that name. This is the second name, we're going to print out that name. This is the third name, we're going to print out that name. This is the fourth name, we're going to print out that name. This is the fifth name, we're going to print out that name. So what we've written is for name in names, print name. Now, the nice thing about this is that we can actually go and apply some conditions to this as well. So let's actually do that. So say, for example, if our name was Buzz, we wanted to print out, let's say, print Buzz, right? So if name equals Buzz Aldrin, then what we're going to do is print sup Buzz. So let's do this now. And what we're going to do is get rid of this print over here. And there you go. So what we're actually doing is we're looping through and we're actually printing out sup Buzz. But right now it just looks like we've only done something once, right? And this is because our if statement doesn't do anything unless this condition is met. So you can start to see how this all fits together, right? So we can loop through and do something multiple times and then apply conditions to actually trigger something when a particular condition is met as we're looping through. Now, the next thing that we're going to go on ahead and do is use, let's actually add some additional conditions to actually print out the rest of our names. So we're going to say Elif, and remember Elif is our next check. So Elif name equals Yuri Gagarin. Then we're going to print out, hey Yuri. And if we go and run this now, we should print out sup Buzz. So we'll loop through, print out sup Buzz. We'll then loop through. Once we get to Yuri, we're then going to print out hey Yuri. And there you go. So we've now gone and applied a second condition inside of our loop. And you can start to see that we're actually looping through. Let's actually print out our names at the same time. So print name. So we're up to Neil, and then we're going to get up to Buzz. And you can see that when we get up to Buzz, let me zoom in on this so you can see it. So once we get up to Buzz, we're going to print sup Buzz. Once we get up to Sally, we're going to do nothing. Once we get up to Yuri, we're then going to print out hey Yuri. And then once we get up to Elon, we're just going to print out hey Elon. Now, there's a bunch of other statements that you can use inside of loops. So say, for example, we wanted to break our loop once we got to Yuri. So stop looping, right? We can actually go and add a condition called, or add a statement called break. And this is going to stop looping through the rest of our loop once we get to Yuri. So if I go and run this now, we're not actually going to print out Elon Musk. Actually, before we do that though, let's finish off our if statement, or if statement block. So let's print else. And then we're going to say print nothing. Or name not part of conditions. I'm going to teach you one other thing inside of that else statement block, but we'll get back to that. All right, so let's focus on this break statement. So say, for example, we're looping. We want to stop, right? So in this particular case, we've gone and found that Yuri's in the list. We now want to stop our loop. We can use the break statement to stop our loop, right? So if we go and hit break, you can see that we are now stopping at Yuri down here. So we've got up to Neil and it's printed name not part of conditions. We've got up to Buzz. We've printed out sup Buzz. So we've got up to here. We've gone to Sally. And remember, Sally does not equal Buzz Aldrin. Sally does not equal Yuri Gagarin. Sally falls into the else bucket. So we're going and printing out name not part of conditions, which you can see there. We're then up to our Yuri. And then we're going, Yuri does not equal Buzz Aldrin. Yuri does equal Yuri Gagarin. So we're printing out, hey, Yuri. And then we're hitting this break statement, and that's where our loop is stopping. So it actually stops then and there. It doesn't continue any further. Now, that sort of gives you or shows you how you can actually stop your loop. So remember, sometimes you'll hear of people creating loops and they'll just go and run forever. Really, really important to understand when and where to use your break. So in this particular case, we're stopping our loop once we get to Yuri. Now, say for example, you wanted to, once you get to a particular person, you wanted to go and say, all right, go to the next value in the list. Don't do anything else. Well, we can actually use a statement called continue. So say for example, I got up to Buzz and say for example, we had a whole bunch of stuff that we needed to do inside of our loop, right? So outside of this if statement, we wanted to go and say, print name, right? Actually, that's a bad example. Let's go print hello world. And let's actually add in a line break as well. So there we go. All right, cool. So what I've gone and written there is print hello world. And then this over here represents a line break inside of string formatting. So /n actually allows us to print out a space between each of our prints. Now you can see here that what we're doing is we're first up printing out our name, or actually let's make this a little bit more relevant. So let's say we're welcoming them, right? Pleased to have you here. So we'll print out whatever the person's name is, and then we're going to say, pleased to have you here, right? So that, let's say they've just arrived at the Space Shuttle Launch Center, right? So if we go and run this, so we're going and printing Neil, name not part of conditions. Pleased to have you here. This is not the nicest welcome, right? Buzz Aldrin, sup Buzz, pleased to have you here. Sally, name not part of conditions, pleased to have you here. Yuri, hey Yuri. And then remember, because we're hitting this break over here, we're stopping. And this means that we don't actually get to this over here as well. Say, for example, because Buzz is part of some special program, we're not going to say pleased to have you here, right? We can actually go to the next word in our statement by using the continue value. So if I type in continue, we are not going to get to this over here. So if I run this, you can see that over here, let's actually print out a line after this as well, so you can see that a bit better. So you can see we're going, all right, so we're getting to our first value in our loop. So we've got to Neil Armstrong. We're then going to go, all right, so name does not equal Buzz Aldrin. So we're going to go to the next statement. Name does not equal Yuri Gagarin. So we're going to go to the next statement, and we're going to fall into this catch-all bucket, name not part of conditions. So Neil falls into name not part of conditions, and then it's going to print out this line here because it's outside of our if statement block. So let's make a comment out of this. Outside of if statement block. All right. So we've got to Neil. We've said, pleased to have you here. We've got to Buzz. And then so we've written Buzz Aldrin. And then we've printed out sup Buzz. And I've added in a line break as well. So you can see that a little bit better. But we haven't gone over to here. Because remember, we should go to this block over here regardless of what statement it falls into. But because we've got to continue, what actually happens is our loop actually goes to the next value within that loop, or within, in this particular case, the next value in our list. So this gives us the ability to actually go on ahead and skip through. Now, there's one last thing that we want to go on ahead and do. So right now we're printing out name not part of conditions. That's not all that nice. So remember, we're welcoming our astronauts into the space station. We don't want to just go and say name not part of conditions. Let's say, for example, we didn't actually know their name. We just wanted to print out, pleased to have you here. So what we can do is we can use another statement called pass. And this basically means do nothing. So the thing is with Python, if we have an else statement, we can't actually just have nothing down here. Otherwise, it's going to throw an error. So what we can do is we can use this keyword, so pass, to actually allow us to continue gracefully. So if I go and run that now, you can see we've printed out Neil Armstrong, pleased to have you here. Buzz Aldrin, what's up Buzz? Sally Ride, pleased to have you here. Yuri Gagarin, hey Yuri. So that shows you pretty much how you can apply a bunch of different components inside of your conditions as well as your loops. Let's take a step back and actually take a look at what we did. So we wrote for name in names. And then remember, we're printing out our name regardless. And then we've got our if statement block. Actually, let's call this what it is. It's a condition block. And then we've got a couple of different components in here. So first up, we've got our if statement, which checks whether or not the name is Buzz. And if the name is Buzz, then we're going to print what's up, Buzz? And then we're going to have a line break. So remember, /n gives us a line break, which you can see down there. And then we're going to continue. So remember, continue allows us to go to the next value in the loop. So next value in the loop. Now, in this case, because we're looping through a list, it's going to go to the next value in the list. But I'm actually going to show you how to loop outside of actually using a list as well. So this is going to go to the next value in the loop. And then we've gone to our Elif statement. So Elif name equals Yuri Gagarin. Then we're going to print Yuri, and then we're going to break. So that is going to stop our loop, right? And this is why we're no longer printing out Elon Musk as well, because this break statement stops the loop. So let's write break statement stops the loop. And then we've got our else statement, and this is our catch-all. And then our pass statement is sort of like a placeholder to do nothing. Cool. So, and that is pretty much loops in a nutshell. So what you want to remember from this is we've used a for loop. So this is one example of a type of loop inside of Python. So for something in something. So remember, we need to loop through an iterator. In this case, we're looping through our list. So for name in names, and then what we're going to do is print out that name. And then we've gone and applied some conditions. So remember, we learned about conditions inside of step 4. And then we also took a look at how we can use the continue statement, the break statement, and then the pass statement. So the continue value allows us to go to the next value in the loop. The break statement stops the loop altogether. And then the pass statement is a placeholder when we're using conditions. So in this case, it basically means do nothing. Now, say for example, rather than looping through a list, we actually wanted to loop a set number of times. Well, what we can do is we can use a method called range, or specifically a function. So we can write another for loop. So for, normally what I say is for idx, so index. And let's actually add a comment. So loop x number of times. God, can't write times. Okay, so for index or idx in, and then this is how we can create a sort of another type of iterator. So we can use range, and then we're going to pass through the number of times we want to loop. Say we want to loop 10 times, we can then print out our index. And you can see that gives us the ability to loop a number of times. So what I've written is for idx in range, and range is sort of our iterator. So this sort of forms the number of times that we actually want to loop. So for idx in range, and then we pass through how many times we want to loop. So 10, then you can see we've actually gone and printed it out 10 times. Now remember, our loop is going to start at the value 0. So that's why it's actually gone and printed out 0. If we wanted to start from the value, if we wanted to start from a different value, what we can actually say is for range 1, 10. Then you can see it's going to start at 1, but this time it ends at 9. So what we want to do is we want to bump this up by 1. So we're going to loop inside of that range. So we're going to start from 1 and go all the way up to 10. So rather than passing through a single number, you can pass through a range. So in this case, 1 to 11, and the 11 is excluded. Okay, so what have we gone and done so far? So we've gone through loops. We've gone through a bunch of different statements. So we've gone through a for loop. We've gone through how we can use the continue statement, the break statement, and the pass statement. And then we've also gone and taken a look at how we can loop a set number of times. Now, there's another loop that I want to take a look at, and this is the while loop. So let's actually go on ahead and use this. So say, for example, we are at the launch pad in our space station, and we're going to launch a bunch of space shuttles out into the atmosphere, right? What we want to do is we want to launch, let's say, for example, 5 different space shuttles. How might we do this? Well, we need to start launching some space shuttles. So let's say, for example, we're going to create a variable to hold how many space shuttles we've launched. And we're going to call this launched shuttles. And we're going to set this equal to 0 because right now we haven't launched any. And then let's say how many shuttles we actually want to launch. So total shuttles equals 5. What we want to do is we want to start launching. So what we're going to do is use a while loop. And so this is creating our variables initially. So to create launch variables. You're basically going to be able to create SpaceX after this, guys. A kid, all right. So we're going to use our while loop. So what we're going to do is we're going to say while true, and then we're going to start looping. So the difference about a while loop and a for loop is a while loop is going to start doing something continuously, and it's only going to stop when you tell it to stop. And this is where our break statement really comes in handy, because you actually need to break out of the loop in order to stop it. Or you actually need to set this condition to something else. But in this case, we've just said while true, which means it's going to be a forever loop. Very, very important that you use a break statement here. So let's go on ahead and loop through. So we are going to say, let's say we launch our first shuttle. So we're going to print out print launch shuttle, or shuttle launched. And then what we want to do is we want to increment how many shuttles we've launched by 1. So what we can do is we can add a number to that. And specifically, we're going to add the number 1 because we're launching 1 at a time. So we can type in launched shuttles plus equals 1. So this is some Python syntax here. So what we're actually doing is we're adding a 1 to our launch shuttle. So we're grabbing the existing value and then we're going to add 1 to this. The way that we could also define this is we could say equals launched shuttles plus 1. Right, so this is just a little bit of, it's basically more Pythonic. So whenever you hear someone refer to something as Pythonic, it basically means that we're using using the majority of the syntax which is available inside of Python to make stuff a little bit cleaner. So rather than doing that, what we're going to say is plus equals 1. And this is basically going to increment our launch shuttles by 1. But what we want to make sure is, or what we want to make sure that we do is that we don't launch more shuttles than we're meant to on that particular day. So right now we've got 5 shuttles that we want to launch. So we want to make sure that we only launch 5. So we'll add in a condition, and you can start to see how our loops work with our conditions really well. So if launch shuttles, and what we're going to say, if it equals 5 equals, we're actually going to say if it equals total shuttles, then what we want to do is we want to print that all of our shuttles have been launched. So print all shuttles launched. And then we're going to break out of our loop. So this is what we're going to use our break statement. So let's actually take a look at what we've written there. So while true, so basically this is going to kick off our loop and start launching our shuttles. We're going to print shuttle launched, and then we're going to increment our launch shuttles by 1. Then if our shuttles or our launch shuttles equals the total number of shuttles that we want to launch, so remember we're using our if statement here, we're ending it with a colon and we're using an equals logical operator. We're going to print all of our shuttles have been launched, and we're going to break out of our loop, which will stop our while loop. So if I go and do this now, you can see we've gone and looped that many times. So what we've gone and done is we've launched a shuttle, launched a shuttle, launched a shuttle, launched a shuttle, and then once we hit 5 shuttles, all shuttles are launched, and then we stop our while loop. Now, the nice thing about this is, say, for example, we wanted to launch 10 shuttles. We can change our total shuttles variable to 10, and this is going to launch 10 shuttles now. Now, if we wanted to, we could also print out which shuttle we've actually gone and launched. And this is something that I wanted to sort of show you as well. This is an example of using string formatting. So rather than just saying shuttle launched, say, for example, we wanted to print out what shuttle number we're up to, right? What we can do is we can use the string formatting function. So we can type in .format, and then the .format is a method that is attached to strings. Remember, we talked about this a little bit inside of our data types. Certain data types are going to have certain methods attached to them. So you'll sort of see this once we get to how to loop through dictionaries as well. So this is an example. Remember, up here, we loop through a list. This is using a while loop. We're also going to take a look at how to loop through dictionaries, because it's really, really important to know. So say, for example, we wanted to print out what shuttle we've actually launched. Well, all we need to do is create a set of squiggly brackets inside of our string. And then we need to pass through what value we want that particular value over here, or our placeholder, to be filled with. And in this particular case, we are going to print out the launched shuttle value. And as of right now, this is going to print out from the number 0. So it's going to start off from 0 and then go up to shuttle 4. Now, what we could do is we could just add a 1 to that. So that's going to start off as shuttle 1. So let's actually take a look at what we did there. So we wrote so we've still got our standard string, but we've gone and applied these squiggly brackets inside of it. And then we've used the .format function over here, or .format method, to actually pass a value into this string. So this is known as string formatting, right? And it makes it just a little bit easier to inject values into your string. So if we go and run that now, we've gone and written something. This should be launch shuttles. So again, we've got an error there. Let's actually take a look at that error. So it's written name error, name launched underscore shuttle is not defined. Now this is basically telling me that this variable doesn't exist at the moment. So let me get rid of that fix. So I've actually gone and I can see here that it's saying on line 8, I've got this error and I've got this error over here. So name launch shuttle is not defined. So if we go to line 8, so 0, 1, or does it start at 0? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh, sorry, it starts at 1. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we've got an error on line 8, which it's indicated to us here. So this is an example of a Python error. And it's saying that particular variable is not defined. Now, right here, we can see that we've actually gone and passed through launched underscore shuttle to this string formatting function. But that variable doesn't actually exist. That's why we're getting that error. The actual variable that we need to pass through is launched shuttles with an S. So if we go and update this now and run it again, you can see that we no longer have that error. So I guess I want to sort of show you how to debug some of these errors when you do encounter them as well. Okay, so what we've got now is shuttle 1 launch, shuttle 2 launch, shuttle 3 launch, shuttle 4 launch, shuttle 5 launch, shuttle 6 launch, shuttle 7 launch, shuttle 8 launch, shuttle 9 launch, shuttle 10 launched, all shuttles now launched. So that gives you the ability to use a while loop, right? So let's add some commentary. So create a while loop. All right, let's take a step back. Let's see what we've written. So remember, we've created our 2 launch variables. So launched underscore shuttles, and we've set it equal to 0 to begin with. We've then set how many shuttles we want to launch in total. So total underscore shuttles equals 10. We've then gone and written while true. So this is basically going to loop continuously until we tell it to stop. We're then printing out whether or not what shuttle we're actually launching. And remember, we've used string formatting there. So the format function allows us to do that. We're then incrementing our launch shuttles by 1. And remember, this is really important because if we don't have this line here, we're going to get stuck in an infinite loop. If you want to try this, try it, but you're going to need to stop your Python kernel if it gets stuck. So in this particular case, it's going to increment it by 1, and then we're going to apply our condition. So you can start to see how our loops work with conditions in conjunction, really. So if launched underscore shuttles equals total underscore shuttles, and then colon, then we're going to print all shuttles launch, and then we're going to use the break statement to stop our loop. Now, what else are we going to do? So we've already gone and looped through our lists. We've gone and taken a look at a while loop. The last thing that I sort of want to show you is how you can loop through a dictionary. So this is probably something that I use really, really often whenever I'm actually doing real life data science projects, because sometimes I'll get my data inside of a dictionary. And if you remember correctly, a dictionary looks like this. So let's actually go and create a dictionary now. So what's it going to look like? All right, it looks like we're going to need to create a dictionary. So we are going to create a dictionary. Actually, we're just going to loop through all of the dictionary, the keys inside of a dictionary. So let's create one dictionary. So we are going to create an astronaut, just like we did yesterday. And remember, the key defining characteristic of a dictionary is that it is defined using squiggly brackets. So our astronaut is going to have a key, which is called name. And remember, we set a key value pair inside of a dictionary. So name and then colon. And then we need to specify a name. So in this particular case, we're going to set it to Elif. Who's a good astronaut? I don't know. We'll set it to me. No. Anyone want to be an astronaut? Okay, no takers. We're going to say Elon Musk. And then we're going to add in another key, and we're going to say suit size. I'm going to set it to medium. Add in a comma, and then we're going to say allergies. And we're going to say peanuts. Now, how do we actually loop through a dictionary? So say, for example, we wanted to do something with each one of these keys. Now, or each one of these keys or values. These are probably, so this was something that I found a little bit tricky to grasp when I first started out inside of Python, but I'm going to show you 3 key statements which are going to serve you really well. So say, for example, we wanted to just loop through the keys and work with the keys. Well, again, we can use a for loop. So we're going to say for key in astronaut.keys. And then what we can do is print out our key. So the .keys method, which is attached to a dictionary, allows us to access all the keys. So if we take a look at that statement, so astronaut.keys, you can see that we get all of our keys returned. And so this basically allows us to loop through and print out or do something with each one of our keys. So this is how to loop through keys. Keys in a dictionary. Say, for example, we wanted to loop through our values. So we actually wanted to get our username. So Elon Musk and then medium and then peanuts, right? We can do that as well. And again, there's a built-in method which is attached to a dictionary which allows us to get our values. So let's actually add some commentary. So accessing dictionary keys. And then down here, we're going to say accessing dictionary values. And to do that, we can type in astronaut.values. And you can see there that we've gone and printed out Elon Musk, medium, and peanuts this time. Then what we can also do is loop through those. So for value in astronaut.values, then print value. All right, I'm going to pause there. Has anyone spotted an error with this, right? So right now, if I go and run this statement, we're going to get an error. So I want to show you this one. So this is a slightly different error to the error that we had originally. This is called a syntax error. And you can see it's actually telling me where that error is. So in line 1, we've got a syntax error in this statement. And this is because we don't have our colon. So it's actually pointing us to where that error is. Now we can fix this just by adding a colon there. So if we now go and run this, we've now gone and looped through each one of the values inside of our dictionary. So this is how to loop through values in a dictionary. And the last thing that I want to show you for dictionary looping is how to loop through both at the same time. So how do we loop through the keys and the values? So let's actually add in a comment. So loop through keys and values at the same time. So what we can do is if we write for, what we're going to say is key and then value in astronaut.items. So the items method allows us to access let's actually take a look. So astronaut.items. This is actually returning a list of tuples here. So you can see that we've got name, Elon Musk, suit size, medium, allergies, and peanuts. So remember, braces or these curved brackets here are a tuple. And remember, the defining characteristic of a tuple is that it is immutable. So what we can actually do is unpack them. So over here, what I'm actually doing is unpacking that in real time. So maybe we'll talk about that or delve into that a little bit later. But just know that when you're looping through items, you're going to write for key, comma, value in astronaut.items. And if I go and print that, so print a key, and then I can pass through a comma and I can print a value as well. So you can see there that we're now looping through our name. Let's actually print it out on separate lines. So we're going to print key and then comma, and then a space and then print the value. We should probably print it after it because that looks kind of weird. There you go. That's better. So what we've written is for key, comma, value in astronaut.items. And then remember, we've added our colon because we need to whenever we're using a for statement. And then we've printed out our key first. And then on a separate line, we've printed out the value. So print value. And then if we wanted to print a space between each one of our lines, you can add in a /n. And this gives you the ability to add a space. So that in a nutshell is how to loop through dictionaries. So remember, if you want to loop through the keys, for key in astronaut.keys, and you could rename this whatever you want. So this variable up here, you could name it. So say, for example, I wanted to call it for dictionary values or dictionary keys. I can change that. And so that gives me the ability to loop through different things. I can name it whatever I want. This is just, I normally call it keys or for key. But that sort of shows you how you can loop through dictionaries. So that in a nutshell. Was there anything else I wanted to show you? Actually, there was one last thing. So say, for example, I wanted to go and transform something and return back an array or return back a list. There is another form of loop known as a list comprehension. And again, this is very Pythonic. So it's going to look a little bit weird when I write it, but you'll see what it means in a second. So what we're going to say is for name in names, and you can see I've already wrapped this inside of a set of brackets. This basically allows me to loop through each value in a list and return something which has been transformed. And what I'm going to get back is a new list. So what I can do is store this inside of a variable. So new list. And say, for example, we wanted to add a Z to everyone's name inside of our names list from, where is it? Up here, right? So this is our names list. Let's say we wanted to add a Z to everybody's name. I don't know why, but actually let's do a better one. Let's actually convert it to title case. So I can type in name.title, and this is going to convert everyone's name to have a capital letter with each name, right? So if I go and print this out, you can see that we've now uppercased each and every name. So this list comprehension comes in handy quite often if you want a single liner, right? So in order to do that, I've written new list equals, and then inside of square brackets. So what we're actually going to be doing is storing everything inside of a new array. We've then written what we want to do to each value. So this is sort of flips it on its head. So we've written name.title. So title is a string function that we can apply to a string. So this actually allows us to capitalize each of the string values inside of a string. So you can see there that we now have capitals. So if I show you the original list, which is called names, you can see that these are all lowercase. This allows us to perform some string formatting and apply title case formatting. So what we've gone and then written is for name in names and then closed out our brackets. So this is an example of a list comprehension, and it's just another way to loop through and actually do something to a set of values inside of a list. Okay, so we've gone through a ton of stuff. So let's actually take a look at what we did. So recap, and then we'll wrap it up. So we went through, let's actually recap on loops first. So we went through a for loop. We went through how we can create a while loop. We also took a look at 3 different ways to loop through dictionaries. So we took a look at how we can use the keys value, the values value, and then the items value. And remember, these are methods attached to dictionaries. And then last but not least, we also took a look at list comprehension. So I tend to use list comprehensions, particularly when I want my code to be nice and tidy. And overall, what we went and did is we went through conditions and logic. So we went through if, elif, and else. We also took a look at how we can use these specific statements inside of our for loop. So remember, we went through for loop. So for something in something else. And then we can use continue to skip to the next value in a loop, break to stop our loop entirely, and pass to do nothing. We then took a look at our while loop, and then we also looked at our dictionaries and our list comprehensions. And on that note, that does wrap it up. Let's take a look and see if we've got any questions. So what do we got? Yes, so in is for lists. Yeah, you can also check it for strings as well. So glad you're enjoying the debugging tips, Dave. What's happening, Leonard? Alrighty, cool. I don't think we've got any additional questions. But again, if you do have questions, do hit me up in the comments. I'm more than happy to share any knowledge that I might have. And I'm also going to be sharing these Jupyter notebooks as well. So on that note, that about wraps it up. So thanks so much again for tuning in, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to give it a big thumbs up, hit subscribe, and tick that bell. And again, I'll see you in the next one.